Thank you everyone for coming tonight. My name is Jordan Pepper and I'm the Executive Director of NAMI Athens. I always love to ask people, does anybody know what NAMI stands for? Everyone heard of NAMI? Yes? Wow, okay, good. Sometimes I get like, it stands for the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And we're a grassroots organization that we band together to provide support and advocacy and education about mental illness. So in Athens, we have existed since 1997. We have a really strong family support group that we have twice a month in Athens. And then we have some, on that back table, feel free when you leave tonight to take some information. We have some really great things starting. So we've also always offered the family-to-family class. We have one of those starting in a couple of weeks, March 17th, actually it's a month. And that's for people who have a loved one with mental illness, and it will help educate about mental illness, how to advocate for your loved one, how to handle crises, things like that. And that's a great class. I was actually in it this past fall, so really kind of a life-changing class for some people who are struggling really with difficult situations. And so we've done that class for many years, and now we have a new one also that's going to start March 17th. It's called NAMI Basics, and that's for parents with children who are exhibiting mental illness and symptoms of signs that they're struggling. So really tailored towards the younger folks and helping give parents those tools for how to deal with it. So really excited about that. And then some other exciting news, we are looking into expanding our services into neighboring Hoffman and Benton counties. So we have been around for a really long time in Athens, and we know that those supports are lacking in the counties around us. So if you know of anyone who might benefit or who maybe we should talk to look into how we can help support those counties, by all means, please contact me. Our information is on the website. You can send an email or Facebook message, however you best like to get a hold of people. So without further ado, any questions about NAMI or what we do at all, feel free to raise your hand. No? Okay. So tonight, for our speaker series, we're excited to have it for the first time in Nelsonville. We've done it historically always at the Athens branch, so we decided to change things up a bit, and we thank you all for braving the cold and coming out. We have Jennifer Roell, who is with the Christopher Roell TBI Foundation, and she's going to talk a lot more about that. But Jennifer, I got to know Jennifer through one of our board members, Ann Walker. We were invited to an event at Stewart's Opera House, and Ann was sitting at the table, and they kind of struck up a conversation, and Ann texted me right away and said, you have to meet Jennifer. She's really, she might be a great speaker for our series. So we've been doing a lot of talking behind the scenes, and Jennifer is not just someone who says like, oh yeah, I want to help out. She actually got training to do family support groups, so she came to a 2-day-long training, and is actually like ready to get to work and start doing some stuff with us, so that's exciting. So without further ado, I will present Jennifer Roell.
Thank you. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you. Yes, I'm proud to say I graduated the class at NAMI, and now I am a NAMI facilitator in training. But this evening, they've asked me to come and talk about myself, my family, my son, and the loss of my son to suicide. This is a hard subject to talk about, and I'll try to talk about it without becoming emotional. But it's a subject that we feel strongly that needs to be discussed. Sadly, there are suicides, in my opinion, this is my opinion, not a scientific study, that are happening more often to younger people in our society. And it happened to our family. So what I am going to talk about tonight is our experience and the hope that you do not go through the same experience that we did. First of all, I'd like to give a basic introduction of myself, the history of myself and the family, information about my son, Christopher, his accident, the treatment we sought, the mental health concerns that came after his traumatic brain injury, the loss of our son, how we've coped with the loss, and why we decided to form the Christopher Roell Traumatic Brain Injury Foundation. Can you all hear me? So again, thank you, Jordan and NAMI, for asking me to speak tonight. I'd also like to thank the Public Library and my family and the TBI Foundation board members that are here, and all of you that have come to hear me. This is a deeply personal journey that my family and I have been on, and my son Christopher, who suffered a traumatic brain injury, which I will refer to as a TBI. From that traumatic brain injury, he faced mental health challenges, and then very sadly, we lost him 6 years to the day after his original accident. I would also like to say that I am not a trained counselor or a medical professional. What I am talking about is based on my experience this evening. The first thing I'd like to do is introduce myself, and my name is Jennifer Sanders Roell. I grew up in this part of Ohio. I was born in 1964, and I'm pointing this out because during my generation and my family's generation of my brothers and sisters, no one ever talked about mental illness, suicide, or suicide prevention. It was never talked about. And going forward, years later, it was a subject that was hard to discuss. And I feel very strongly that this is a subject that we need to discuss and bring to the forefront. Our brain is our largest organ in our body. When our brain is injured, we need to see that it heals, and we need to take care of it. So I'm going to go into a story now about my family, my husband, my children. My husband and I met in 1990, and we began having a family. We have 3 children, Bernie, Christopher, and Sarah. The conversation I'm having this evening is about my son, Christopher. He was our middle child. In saying that, he was an incredibly happy and inquisitive child. He was kind, respectful, outgoing, loved his family and friends. He was always happy, always happy. He loved sports, was always in various activities, never met a stranger. He played soccer, and he was a very good soccer player. He told me when he was little, "Mom, I was born to play soccer." When you would drop a ball in front of him, he would run faster with the ball in front of him than without the ball. At that time, we lived near Reading, Pennsylvania, and my sons got to attend a soccer camp from junior high and high school that had the prestigious coaches from the University of Santa Barbara, California, attending and running this camp. From an early age, they saw my sons, both of my sons, play soccer, and every year after that, until they graduated high school, they kept an eye on my sons. In particular, Christopher, the one that could run extremely fast and could hit a target wherever it was with a soccer ball. They offered him a scholarship to the University of California to play soccer. As a family, we thought, wow, well, what are we going to do? But this was his dream. And we toured the school and decided that he would go to school there. It was like sending my son to paradise at the age of 18 years old to go to college. It was a beautiful campus. He made many friends. He got to play on the soccer team. He was living the dream. Until the unthinkable happened. It was February 17th, 2012. President's Day weekend. The team did not have any games. The school had no classes that day. Christopher and his friends, as college students will, were at a party in a community called Isla Vista, which is in Santa Barbara, California. Isla Vista is a beautiful, picturesque community overlooking the Pacific Ocean. As the night went on, Christopher went outside and stepped over a small fence about so high. And the next thing his friends knew, he fell to a ledge 10 feet below. They tried to hurry to him and tell him not to move. But in the meantime, when he tried to stand up, he fell 40 feet to the rocky beach below. He was unconscious. His friends immediately ran down the street from the beach house, down the beach entry, and across the beach to find him. They contacted the emergency services, and they came as soon as they possibly can. He was transported to the University of Santa Barbara. It was called the Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital in Santa Barbara. At the time, my husband and I were actually in Washington, D.C. at my daughter's volleyball tournament. When we received the call at 3:47 a.m. in the morning on February 18th, it was 12:47 a.m. in California. They already had Christopher in the hospital, and the hospital staff contacted us. As it was 3:47 a.m. in the morning, we were asleep in the hotel, and I couldn't find my cell phone. When my phone stopped ringing, my husband's phone started immediately, so I knew there was something. When we got to the phone and my husband answered it, they identified who they were and said that our son had had a serious accident and that we needed to get to California as fast as we could. Now it's 3:47 in the morning at Washington, D.C. How are we going to do that? By the grace of God, my husband started making phone calls. I started making phone calls to see who my daughter could stay with while we were in Washington, D.C., because her team was there. And my husband called the airport, and somehow or another, we were able to get 2 seats from Washington to Phoenix, and then from Phoenix to Santa Barbara. It was the worst plane ride of our life. We had no idea what lay ahead. By the time we arrived in California, they had Christopher in a drug-induced coma. They did this to reduce the swelling and brain damage. Throughout his stay in the hospital, he was on life support. He had several surgeries, and then there was a long and grueling recovery. His rehabilitation was intensive with physical therapy, cognitive, and mental therapy. Weeks after the therapy and multiple treatments later, our doctors were very hopeful and said that they felt that he was making a full recovery. When they said that, what they meant was a full physical recovery. He did make a full, he was very athletic. He did make a full physical recovery. But when you have a traumatic brain injury, no one knows how you will heal from it. Before the accident, Christopher did not show any signs of any type of mental health struggles. But his traumatic brain injury changed that. His mental health concerns began to emerge, and he had issues that we had never faced before. As a family, we decided to bring him back home with us, which we lived in Pennsylvania at the time. He continued his therapies, physical, mental, and cognitive therapies. Christopher wanted to resist moving back because he loved his school at California. He wanted to have the chance to continue playing soccer. But as a family, we knew it was the right decision to bring him home.
Yeah, but
At first, he seemed to be doing well. He attended his therapy classes. We even got to the point where he would go back to a college in Pennsylvania. But then we started noticing periods of confusion, high anxiety, and there were shifts in his personalities. It was as if he had changed to a different person during those times. Some days he would be his old self. Other days he was withdrawn. He could be aggressive and sometimes even mean. And I don't think my son was ever mean a day in his life before. He was eventually prescribed medication to help with his mental health issues. When he would take the mental health medication and would stay on it consistently, it would seem to help him. But as a family, we had a struggle keeping him on the medication because there were side effects to the medication that he did not like. It would cause physical and side effects. It would cause effects such as he wouldn't be able to sleep. There were multiple effects. We would talk to him and we would urge him to stay on the medication, but we would go back and forth with him. As he went more into adulthood, we found this, as our parents, somewhat frustrating. We were not frustrated with Christopher. We were frustrated with the medical society. We were his primary caregivers and we were his providers. And when we noticed these changes that were occurring with him, it was very difficult to talk to the doctors because our son was of legal age. And although we did not have guardianship of him, to communicate with the medical society was very difficult. We were very concerned about his well-being and what was happening. But we kept on and we kept urging him to take his medication. There were moments of optimism when he seemed like he was doing very well. He was living a normal life. He was working, driving. He could handle everyday responsibilities. And again, he returned to college and was taking college course classes. But in the background, there were still times when he had intrusive thoughts, auditory hallucinations, and visual distortions. Sometimes these were caused by not taking the medicine. This was caused by the traumatic brain injury. Again, I am not a medical profession, so I cannot give you an exact definition of what was going on. But we were very diligent in trying to get him help and trying to see that he took his medication. He went to college in January of 2018. He had gone and he had found a house and had roommates and was taking classes.
And
But on the evening of February 16th, he called and had an extended conversation with his dad. Excuse me. And he wanted to come home. Of course, we told him he could come home. But we wanted him to wait until the following morning. However, he was so concerned that we think, or we know, that he left his home on campus very late on February 16th and started driving home. He was about an hour outside of Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. And we're not sure if he had issues with his pickup truck. But he was on his way back home. His truck was off to the side of the highway. We think that perhaps he was having a moment where his thoughts and he was confused. He climbed to the top of an overpass bridge and made the tragic decision, and we lost him very early on February 17th, 2018, in that morning. I want to say that the loss of a child is something that no one should ever experience. The pain is indescribable, and the grief never goes away. I think of him every day. I talk to him every day. I wait every day to hear him come through the door and ask me what's for dinner. I hear his laugh, I see him dance, and I see him play soccer. Through it all, Christopher was larger than life. He was a great person, a wonderful son, a loyal friend, and someone who made a lasting impact on everyone he met. Though the grief is unbearable, I do know now that my son did struggle for 6 years, and he's at peace now. Though I'm still going through the healing process myself, some of the things I've done to help myself and my family, I've received professional help myself through the assistance of trained counselors. I've attended grief groups. I've now attended classes in mental health awareness. And I have spoken on behalf of my son and the Christopher Roell Traumatic Brain Injury Foundation. There are things that I wish that I knew now, or knew then, that I know now. But I know my son is at peace with God, and that he is with God. In this, my family and I have decided to form the Christopher Roell Traumatic Brain Injury Foundation. We've done this to honor our son. We'd like to bring awareness to traumatic brain injuries, mental health, and suicide prevention. If we can provide information that will help anyone or any one of your loved ones, this is our goal. We want to make people seen and heard that have mental health concerns. Excuse me, I'm sorry. We also want to break the stigma around mental health. Mental illness is not something to be ashamed of. It's something that we need to understand and we need to bring to the forefront. In the beginning, I was talking about my age and generation, how no one ever talked about mental health, traumatic brain injuries, or suicide. We need, as a society, we owe it to all of us to increase the communication about mental illness. Our brain, again, is our biggest organ. If we break our arm, we seek medical help through a doctor. If we break our brain, we need to see that our brain is fixed. Mental illness needs to be talked about in a public forum more than it is. We need more information from our medical providers, our insurance providers, everyone involved. There is hope through all of this that healing is possible and you can rebuild your life, but please keep the lines of communication open with you and your loved ones. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for listening. My son Christopher always helped everyone. And he always said, mind over matter, Mom. He said, we need to do what we can help. Thank you. So, if I could answer any questions or anything, I will be happy to do that. Yes.
Can I jump in and say something?
Absolutely. This is my son, Bernie.
Hey, how's it going, guys? So, this is my beautiful mom. Been through a lot. This is a very tough story for her to tell, and the reason why she's trying to tell this is to bring awareness before something like this would happen in someone else's life. Yes, we went through this tragedy, but we don't want to see, we would never wish this. Well, I'm not really dressed, by the way, for this. We would never wish this on our worst enemy. Some of that suffering through mental health or having mental health problems. My mother said, my brother was a Division I athlete. This is the guy that scored a goal against Germany. His TBIs happen to about 1.2 million people a year. You be driving in a car, boom, happens to you. It doesn't matter how it happens. It just can happen to you. And, the big thing about bringing awareness to it is it's not talked about enough in the sense of you don't know the information and it might happen to you, so you just might think it's not normal for these things to be happening in your life.
Well, there are so many unknowns about traumatic brain injuries that we have found through our own research that what may affect one person may not affect the other person the same.
Exactly.
And so there are many, many factors in the brain injuries.
So yeah, we just want to make sure that it's okay to talk to somebody. It's okay to go get help. It's okay to talk to your family members. There's not a bad stigma about medicine, because a lot of people with traumatic brain injuries or mental health, they go through processes where they think that the medicine is actually kind of not helping them, like, oh, it's hurting them. Well, if you know this information before you get in an accident, you may have less tendencies to come off of the medicine. Like, you might not, if the medicine is helping you, you might think to yourself, I need to stay on it. But if you don't have this information, if it's not talked about publicly, you never even know. You know what I mean? You just know when you break your arm, you go to the hospital, you get a cast, they fix it. No one really talks about if you have a mental health problem, you take the medicine, you stay on the medicine, it helps. Work with your doctor, So, but it's a tough story for my family and my mom to say. It's hard for her to get up here. That's the main objective. Just bring awareness and, let your family members know that we care, you care about them. Because there's not a day that goes by in my mind, my mom, my dad, and my sister's mind that we don't think about our brother and sister, our brother. And, you have other options besides, you know, committing suicide or, you know, so that's just, you know, just bring awareness, and it's okay to talk with your family members, to ask them if you have a helping hand, or, you know, it's tough, you know, but let's give my mom a round of applause, you know, let's talk sports here in the home. So, love you, Mom.
Me too. Yes.
So in terms of advocacy, if we were to go up and like in the state house, you enter in 6, there's an advocacy day and you're welcome to come with. If we were to go and talk to our legislators, was there anything that you would want them to understand about your struggle as a parent of an adult who can say, no, I'm not taking that medication?
Yeah.
Even though as you as a parent, you see that he needs it. Anything in terms of that you think would be helpful in terms of like advocating for?
So again, I'm only speaking for my own personal experience.
Sorry.
Because my son was over the age of 21, and although we were his primary caregivers and his primary providers, and when I say that, I mean at the time, you know, everything for him, his home, everything. He did work, but I think when a person is going through mental illness, whether it's caused because of a traumatic brain injury, whatever the cause may be, there is a level of confusion with those people that they need someone to be able to speak on their behalf. Because as an adult, I know that there are situations on a daily basis that I experience that can be confusing. So when you have a patient that is experiencing mental health concerns, when they are being explained medical procedures, medicine, treatments, therapy, it can be overwhelming, and they need someone there to speak on their behalf. And the fact that you have to be able to have a signed guardianship in order to help provide them that information, and in order to help provide their caregivers, meaning the medical society, their information, would be most beneficial to those patients on their behalf. You're speaking on their behalf. If I was unable to speak and did not know sign language and was unable to write, someone would need to speak on my behalf. And so I do feel very strongly about that. And I also believe that more information needs to be made available to the public about the medications that they are provided, because some of these medications can be very strong and can cause other side effects. And yeah, that's, I do, yeah, I would appreciate.
Some of the medications actually have suicidal tendencies associated with them. I mean, just to Jennifer's point, because I really, really tried hard to, when I knew Christopher was having a.
Can you identify yourself?
I'm doing the dog bit. I'm never a dog bit at school. Got that part out. No, whenever I was trying to get Christopher help, you know, I was actually trying to call the doctor in advance of his appointment. And I said, I understand, you know, HIPAA privacy laws, he's of the age, you know, he can consent to bring us in with him, or he may not, but I really need to let you know what we're seeing.
They treated us like we were, they treated us like we were like calling to say negative things, and we were trying to provide them with information. When you see your loved one on a daily basis, and you hear your loved one on a daily basis, it's different than when you see them for an hour at a time, 2 times a week or 3 times a week. And I can put on my best face and go in and see the doctor.
When, like, I would call the doctor, I would say, here's what I'm seeing Christopher doing. He's paranoid, he thinks people are throwing him. He used to use the word innuendos, you know, like, he was left-handed, phenomenal left-handed player, but he felt in his mind he needed to be more right-handed. And so if you had your arms crossed over right over left, he would think you were trying to throw him like an innuendo that he needs to be more right-handed. So these are the kind of things I would express to the doctor. Can you ask him about that? But I don't know what they talked about in those meetings, but I felt like, I said, Christopher, how did the meeting go with the doctor? Did you talk about anything special? He's like, yeah, I told her about my injury and my remarkable recovery. And, you know, I'm a model candidate for her, you know, therapy study. And that's all, you know, so I don't know if he was telling her what he thought she wanted to hear, you know, and so I'm not sure if like, and you know, the right things are happening because you're looking back from the doctor. You're left in the dark, you know, and it's like, okay, you know, and then he, you know, I wondered if medication was prescribed, right? Because there's no like exact formulation or combination of drugs. So yeah, there's a lot, I think, you know, to the science that still needs to be discovered. Because everybody says, you know, like UC Santa Barbara, world-renowned neurosurgeon, Dr. Zahner was his name. You know, Jennifer mentioned, you know, that he told Christopher, I think you're going to make a full recovery. Well, that was burned into his memory bank, and
He did.
wow,
He actually.
therapy was phenomenal. The cognitive therapy, the speech therapy, and you know, initially when he was recovering, we're just, you know, it's unbelievable the progress he's making. In fact, when he left, you know, doctors and nurses were moved to tears because, you know, there's probably been over 25 cases where people had fallen off those cliffs in Santa Barbara. There's probably only 2 that ever survived.
He was one of only 2 that had ever survived. And he did make a physical recovery. But as the years progressed, and for lack of better term, with the traumatic brain injuries, when the brain healed and the wires went back together, the most frustrating part of it all for him was that process, the thought process, again, there were days when it would be Christopher, and then there would be days where he would be frustrated and confused.
So a major goal of ours, because I have family that works in mental hospitals, and we wanted to always try to keep them out of a mental hospital, not for like, when they get sent, when someone with a traumatic brain injury or a mental problem gets sent to a mental hospital, they kind of get lumped in with everybody. So they could be in there with drug users, they could be in there, you know. So my brother would end up in a mental hospital, and I'm not saying like some cases were worse or better than his, but he would get in there, and it would almost be like he'd come out worse because he's not as in a severe case. So now he's in there with, you know, if you've ever done, you know, talk to people or people that work in a hospital, it is, you know, you can have a severity of, high severity person, even with something that's not severe. So that it almost kind of made my brother, I'm not crazier sometimes, but it almost made him crazier.
Well, there was a level of frustration and anxiety that he would experience. And there truly are, I mean, we do know that there are truly traumatic brain injuries as a result of other instances such as stroke, some type of addiction, traumatic brain injury in which Christopher suffered, illness, and sometimes it just happens. There's no explanation for it. But they all need to be treated, and they all need to have the chance to have the treatment, the therapy, and if it does require medication. Because there are many times they can heal from,
Main problem is.
yeah, I'm sorry, there's a hand up.
I was just going to ask, as advocacy that you were talking about, from what I've heard, I feel like we should advocate for legislation to be passed, allowing the parents or the caregivers to have the ability to have a say if they're over 18, right? Rather than not being allowed to speak, knowing what they know.
Yeah, so basically we were told, because this is really, I was very close to my brother, like we were two and more brothers my entire life. And what I helped him get back into college and I stayed with him. So I always, like, it got that brotherly intuition. And the problem is basically we're told by the medical field that you have to make him a ward of the state so you can take that you have to take his guardianship. And that was completely the opposite. We wanted him to be able to, live and fulfill and have a life on.
Well, he wanted that
Yeah,
himself.
he wanted that.
He-
and
he
the
wa-
problem is, it's like if you take their guardianship, now you're like, we thought in our brains, that's like the reverse psychology. Like you're stripping them. Because my brother constantly felt that we were trying to help him, but we were trying, like our family was trying to help him, but he thought we were against him,
Well, no, it wasn't that way all the time. It
No,
was,
no,
but
not all the time. I'm just.
right, there were times when it was, yeah.
So that's the main hurdle we really struggled with because we were,
Mm.
and that's just our family, So, but
Yes,
Are you heartened at all by the, encouraged in any way by all the increasing awareness of PTSD? Because there's just growing awareness and it's just an ever burgeoning area of concern, medical diagnosis,
I think that
treatment,
I think that any awareness that is being made is always helpful. I think that it all goes back to communication and education, and whether it's the good, bad, and we do have to face the ugly because there is ugly out there that needs to be faced. Any communication and education is a benefit to what we all are going through. As a society, I think the fact that there are more people and the awareness is wider now than it was is a positive on that point. However, suicide is a tragedy that can be prevented, and we can prevent it by communicating. Sometimes communication is not a conversation. Sometimes it's just sitting in the chair beside that person and getting them through that moment or that day, through that week, because we don't know how long that time is going to be for those people either that it's occurring to. And we need to show more patience and kindness as a society while we're dealing with this, because you don't know what I'm going through in that particular day, and I don't know what you're going through in that particular day. And it's my goal to prevent at least one person from this happening to again.
So, just related to the foundation that we set up on behalf of Christopher, and we've been doing it now for 3 years. We actually established it shortly after his death, but we had money that we got through donations, but it took us like 4 years to kind of, as a family, come to grips with how we wanted to, spend the money that we raised for him. And, when we finally decided on, a music venue, then thankfully, Hockey College, allowed us to take advantage of what they had over there. Now we had a goal to kind of really raise awareness around mental health and traumatic brain injury and suicide prevention. And I am just like amazed at like how many people have thanked us for, you know, putting a spotlight on how important this is. And so, you know, maybe it, you know, we'll get to the point where, you know, we'll be, you know, real advocates, you know, to get legislation changed for people. You know, we're taking kind of, you know, baby steps, and we're going this, but I can tell you that, you know, 1 in 5 people, you know, probably know somebody that has a mental health issue, has suffered from depression, suffered from anxiety, myself included. So it's real, and it touches so many people, you know, in our country and across the globe. And I feel like in recent times, like, you know, within the last year or two, I feel like it's on the news every day, where people are talking about post-traumatic stress disorder, mental health, you know, take care of your mind. You're seeing more commercials, you know, so I'm glad to see that,
Yeah.
but I feel like we just need to continue to keep touching people.
Yes, Betty?
It makes me think, first of all, thank you for speaking tonight.
Thank you.
And thank your family for doing what you're doing. It's wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
The lawyer in me wants to say, okay, what does that legislation look like that we could craft, that you could take forward, that could actually move the needle? And so I'm thinking, you know, in a court setting, if we have a minor child or somebody who can't care for themselves, the court will order a guardian ad litem to be appointed who doesn't take over the guardianship of the child, but advises the court in a way to help that child, okay? Would it be reasonable to suggest that such a mirrored system with the physicians and the health professionals being the judge, in this case, to appoint a guardian ad litem in a case by case basis, since they know the patients, right? And then that guardian ad litem could be a family member, but in many cases there is not a family member, right? So it could be, as in the courts, another person who's trained in that area to be serve in that capacity for whatever period of time is needed for an individual. That might be something concrete that you could draft and set forward in front of the legislature to say, here's how to make that happen.
And I'm thinking, I would think that there should be guidelines or a criteria for that person that to speak on their behalf. However, some situations, there's a great need of urgency, such as it could require something to be done within the next few minutes when you are put in that situation. And I don't know how you could have, obviously you want someone, as you said, a family, obviously there has to be a high level of trust there for that person to speak on behalf of the person that has the mental health concerns that can't speak on their own. And I don't know how, as a lawyer, you may be able to shed more light on that than we can.
Not dual, like he still has guardianship over himself, but like, I think it'd be like good, like, I've thought about that before myself, like if my brother had, like when he was in the hospital, he had a TBI, and then the doctor, instead of saying, oh yeah, he's gonna make a full recovery, the doctor could have said something like, you know, maybe for 10 years, you have some sort of guardianship over him, because there could be some underlying issues.
Well, I think
That'd be nice to know, you know, because a lot of things with mental health too is, in males and females, it doesn't come all, especially around that, it's the weird age of 18 to 27, because well, it could happen to anybody after.
Well, can I say something? I do know, I do feel that at the time when the doctor was saying that to Christopher, he was instilling hope in him, hope and that it's giving him hope that it's going to be all right. But with the level of traumatic brain injury that he had at that time, there was really no way of knowing what what was going to happen. I mean, and so I do believe that, and I do believe, there is a certain level of maturity and stubbornness in that particular age range also. I understand where they want to be able to make the decisions on their own, but it has to be that if their loved ones around them are seeing that they are not able to make the decisions, there has to be someone that can be entrusted with those decisions for them. So,
I think it's just important no matter what the situation or the accident or whatever you're going through, it's important for just healthcare to be constantly reminding individuals that there is help out there. You have other people to talk to, and a lot of times that information, sadly, isn't provided.
that's right.
So I think that's the main thing. It's just
That's right.
more knowledge about mental health help, because any physical accident can happen, whether it's a broken arm or a more serious injury. Your mental health can still be affected in the same manner.
That's right.
So
And it happens. Sometimes we feel that we don't have enough resources, but we lived right outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and there were not enough resources there. We need resources, we need advocacy, we need education. Again, if you're a diabetic, you're going to seek medical help from your doctor and medication. I think that the medical society and advocacy for mental health need to come together more so that we can communicate better. Because on any given moment, as you said, on any given moment, we could all be suffering from a mental illness. But
well, thank you. I want to be mindful of the library's
thank you all
time.
so much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for coming. And if anyone, that Advocacy Day is May 6th, so if anyone's interested in joining at the State House, then if not, so you can email me.